What's going on, guys? Welcome to the Sledgehammers in the Office YouTube channel. Today we're going to be talking about some framing basics. So we're going to try and treat this like someone doesn't know anything about construction, anything about framing, and we're going to try and leave them with a thing or two by the end of the video. I'm going to say that this is going to be for entertainment purposes only because I don't want anyone to go out and get hurt. So make sure that if you are going to be using power tools, that you are a person who should be using them. So we'll say professional. But let's get into the fun part of this. So let's talk about measurement real quick. On our piece of wood, and I'm going to do my best. I know you guys probably aren't going to be able to see all of this. Right now, our tape measure is going to be divided into 1/16 of an inch. I've got this tape measure. It goes to a foot right now. I'm going to try and hold it correctly. So this is just short of a 1 foot block by a 1/16 of an inch. So 11 and 15/16. But if I were to measure diagonally, now I'm at 12.5 inches. So whenever I'm using my tape measure, it doesn't matter if it's on the far side, close side, in the middle. I just need it to be straight all the way through because it's 11 to 15/16 here, 11 15/16 here, same thing up top. But once I start going diagonal, that starts to change. So one of the next things we're going to talk about with measuring is going to be when I want to cut something and mark it, I'm going to use what's called a crow's foot. So I'm going to come to the 8-inch mark, put the point of the pencil on that mark right there, and now I have created our crow's foot. The reason for that is when you're doing a larger layout and you need to come back, you don't want to be guessing, is that my point or is that my point? So we do two of them, wherever they touch together, that's going to be the point that we're going to be cutting. Now, let's talk about what is called a roofing square. Some people call it framing square, but this is actually a roofing square. This is going to be used when we want to create a square line on our block so that we could go and cut it. So what I'm going to do is put that right up against the edge right there. I want to be able to leave enough room for my pencil. I need this to be consistent all the way through, so don't be pushing your pencil necessarily, but more moving your hands so that the pencil can be riding the same part of that roofing square all the way through. Now I've got my straight line. Now I've got a place to cut. When you're cutting a line, if you're doing a lot of cuts, there's going to be little variations that you see. Sometimes you might make a mistake on the mark. So either you can flip it over, redo it, or if you need to at times, you'll need to make a mental note or tell anyone that you're working with, hey, leave it a little long, or leave the line, which is going to mean after they cut it, you still want to see that line, just barely. If you say, hey, leave it short, they're going to take it just before the line, and if you say take the line, you want them to just be taking the line with the edge of the blade. The edge of the blade is going to be a 1/16 to an 1/8 of an inch thick, depending on how new the blade is, what kind of a blade is, things of that nature. So that's why this becomes important. We never, I'm going to flip this over, if I need to cut 2 4-inch blocks out of this piece right here, I am not going to measure at 4 inches and then at 8 inches. Why? Because if I can get my tape measure right, show you guys. If I go at 4 inches and cut my line there, and then I go to 8 inches to cut my next line there, which I've got no lines on here, so don't be freaking out if you don't see anything. But I'm going to be taking away a 1/16 of an inch into that block, which if I do that one time, is that big of a deal? Not really. But if I start going 4, 8, 12, 16 all the way down the line, by the end, that can start to really shrink up because I'm starting to chew into a lot of what I've been doing based on the variation. So one of the tricks though would be to say, hey, if I want to cut 2 pieces out of one board and I want to be able to mark everything out before I go grab my saw, I'm going to mark it at 4 inches and then I'll flip my tape measure around, mark it at 4 inches on this side. You're going to have to trust me on this. 4 inches right there. I've got my 2 crow's feet. I can square it up with my square, mark them both, boom, boom, all that good stuff. So there, and being sloppy, so keep it tight when you do it. So then I can cut that line. Now I've got my 2 4-inch blocks, right? And if I have an 8-foot stud to start with, that means that if I'm doing the smaller cuts on the ends, I can still do multiples on the way down. Use your mathematics to know if you can do that on your stud or not. But let's move on now to talking about studs and their, stud layout. But first, let's talk about dimensions. This is a 2x4. It's supposed to represent 2 inches by 4 inches. Back in the day, it was truly 2 inches wide and 4 inches long, whatever it is, thick, whatever, I don't care. Nowadays, it is 1.5 inches and 3.5. So that's going to be important to remember when taking into consideration things for your wall. I'll show you an example of that here shortly. So the 2x6 is going to be 1.5 by 5.5. Once you get up to 2x8, I believe it goes to 1.5 by 7.25. So always pay attention, especially if you're not very familiar with the sizes of your lumber. Make sure just to throw a tape measure on it. I've got 3.5, I've got 1.5. If it's a 2, it's always going to be 1.5, but where it should be. Anyways, let's take a look at what we're going to be doing today. I'm going to pick up the camera. Trucks are driving by. We have a wall that we're going to be building. So on the bottom over there, you're going to see a brown piece of wood. What is that? That is a pressure treated piece of wood. What does that mean? That means that they've gone through and injected a bunch of chemicals. Let's see if I can not drop my camera and show you. See all the little injection points right there? Oh, my camera's trying to slip on me. Anyways, I'm gonna adjust this. We'll try and keep talking. That is filled with chemicals to make sure that when, not if, any termites or any other bugs try and bite into it to chew on it, that they are going to not go any farther. That is should be insect repellent and also weather resistant board right there. That's going to be what goes on the floor. If you're in a new build and you walk around, it should be called green plate, and it should have a green tint to it. It's almost going to look like the bottom plates. That bottom plate is the one that gets attached to the bottom of the wall that goes against the floor. Has been spray painted green. If it is on second stories, you don't need to be concerned with that. That is only for the parts of the wood that is immediately in contact with the concrete. So moving on, right now we have a layout for our wall. Let me drop my block. Bang. Okay, now walls are typically laid out either 16 inches on center or 24 inches on center. So that means that stud is going to start at 0, 24 inches. We're going to have one at 48, and then this is going to be the rest of it because it's going to be closer than 24 inches. We'll talk about what's going on, where is it? Over here in a little bit, but we have our bottom plate on the bottom. That has our layout. We're going to create our layout for our top plate, which will be our stud that goes up there. We are going to create a 96-inch wall. What does that mean? Well, our 8-foot studs are 96 inches, but I want my wall at 96 inches. And if we have a bottom plate and if we're going to have a top plate, that means we're subtracting 1.5 plus 1.5, going back to what we talked about earlier. So that means that all of our studs need to be cut from 96 down to 93. So we're going to demonstrate that over here. The other thing is we need to get our layout correct so that we can attach all of these together. This is one example of framing where we are going to stand it up. There's also stuff where you can frame it in place. That's a little different, but a lot of the mechanics are going to be the same of cutting the pieces of wood, nailing in, all that good stuff. So I'm going to try and set you down over here. I got to figure out how to film this because my camera stand are not being cooperative. So let's see. We need to cut this guy first of all at 93 inches. So once again, like we talked about, tape measure, right on mark. Tape measure goes on the end over here. So I put this down. I'm making sure that I'm writing the edge right here. I can be in the middle, I can be on the other edge, doesn't matter. I take this, I crow's foot at 93 inches. I'm going to take my roofing square, mark it with a straight line, and this is why, once again, like we said, I need to go get my saw. I don't want to be guessing about where that crow's foot was, so I'm going to come over here. I'm pretty confident where that crow's foot landed, where that straight line landed, so what does that mean? I'm going to be just barely taking that line off. I don't want to be cutting it short, I don't want to be leaving that line, anything like that. Remember, if someone says leave the line, when you bring back that piece of wood to show it to them, or if they're calling out measurements and they expect you to put it in and they're going to come back later and double check your work, they want to see a thin pencil line up there. It doesn't mean leave like an 1/8 of an inch or a 1/4 of an inch, but like a 1/16 just to be able to show that pencil line up top. So it's going to get a little loud. Something I want to demonstrate right here is there's a couple ways to cut a piece of wood. I put my foot down here, far away from my saw, right? The other way that you can do this is by bracing it on, there we go, on top of other pieces of wood. But the reason why I'm doing this is because I want gravity to let the piece of wood fall away, because if I take this, and I'm pushing here, and I'm cutting right here, that wood is going to start to bind on my blade. It can create enough tension that it will actually stop the saw. So that is why if I'm over my foot, very far away to make sure that it's safe, gravity's going to drop that right there, so that just dropped off nicely. I'm not having it pushed on anything to where it starts binding on that blade as we cut through it. Same thing like we said over here. So this is now 93 inches. I'm going to set it over here for our wall. Now, let's talk about layout. This is our top plate, like we said. This one is the lighter piece of wood, so it's going to be easier for you guys to see when I drag the camera over here. We are going to be starting at 0 for our layout. There's a couple tricks that we're not going to get into in regards to what is that going to be when we're sheathing a wall or putting drywall on it, but you do not need to know about that right now. We'll talk about that later. So I'm going to take my pencil, mark an X at the end because that's where a stud's going to go. A stud goes at 0. I'm going to take my pencil, I'm going to make a crow's foot at 24, 48, so on and so forth. I'm going to come back behind that and strike a line with my roofing square. I've already done that, so you don't need to watch me do all of those again. I'm going to flip this over, I'll drag the camera over. So here's what I'm going to show you real quick. There's going to be an X where every stud is. So I have my crow's foot, 0, 24, 48. This is for the door, so don't worry about that. And then at the end, I've got all my crow's feet laid out. The X's are going to be the side that the stud goes on. This becomes very important because if I just put a lot of crow's feet on the ground and then someone's coming behind me, which side of the line is that stud supposed to go on? So we always mark which side of the line that's supposed to be on. I'm going to grab you guys and show you. So there's my X at 0. There's the crow's foot, my line, the X right there, crow's foot line, X right there, crow's foot line, X. See, now it's on the other side. That's why it's important to pay attention to. I've got my crow's foot because this is going to be the end of the wall, and we've got a whole bunch of X's. So we said that is going to be the top plate for this guy over here. So let me see if I can set you guys down in a good spot to be able to watch what's going to happen next. We are now going to take our top plate. I've already got this laid out. When you have your top and bottom plate, you should be able to line up next to each other. All these marks should be the same. So there's some times where you can actually take two studs, hold them together, and go from there. So I should be able to take this guy. This is going to line up top. This is going to line up right there. 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 Got my X on that one. That's it. X. X. Right? Now we're starting to look pretty square. Now we can nail it all together. I had this question when I was first starting in regards to how many nails should I put between the two boards going each way? Because if you start nailing it too much, people will be like, whoa, you're wasting nails. Sometimes you can start compromising the integrity of the wood. The rule of thumb that I learned, and this is more of a rule of thumb rather than gospel, is going to be however wide the piece of lumber is, divide that in 2, that's how many nails you want at least, okay? And usually if you have that many, you're going to be all right, as long as it's not shot in a bad way, but don't worry about it right now. So 2 by 4, divide 4 by 2, that is going to be 2 nails. If I have a 2 by 8, I take that 8 divided by 2, that's going to be 4, so that gets 4 nails. Same thing, 2 by 12, divide that by 2, 6, all that good stuff, so on and so forth. Have fun with mathematics. So I'm going to grab our happy nail gun. I have a cordless nail gun, courtesy of Milwaukee. Nails are going to feed in. This for you guys. Nails feed in from the bottom. Each nail gun is going to be different. Drop it in. Nails go in right there. I've got my setting set, so I'm going to go through and nail these off. 2 nails on each one. We'll probably either hit fast forward or cut at this point, nail it all together, and then come back. Before we do that, though, we're going to talk about doors. So this door right here, this is what we're laying out. It's a door. Surprise. Anyways, that door needs to have a rough opening of 30 inches by 80 inches. So it needs to be 30 inches wide by 80 inches tall. What is rough opening? That means that is the framing opening. the finishes are going to be the finished opening, right? So just roll with me on the terminology. So we needed a 30-inch by 80-inch rough opening, which I actually cut those two studs wrong, which other stuff does not matter. We'll make it work. We'll skip alterations, everything's fine. Anyways, I'll show you what I made a mistake on. So the distance from the floor to the top of this framing over here is going to be 80 inches. The width is going to be 30. So that's what I was going to tell you. The distance is 30, right? We can't go more than 24. So what do? We're going to create a header for ourselves. Now this is where it gets very important, guys. This header that I'm showing you in a non-load bearing wall, since it's under 4 feet, this is going to be way overkill. Headers become very, very, very important in load bearing walls. So please make sure you have a blueprint. Make sure you know what you're doing before you start going cowboy on this. This is a non-load bearing wall. It's going to live out here for future videos, all kinds of stuff like that. And like I said, it's way overkill for something of this nature. But here's what we're going to do. I'll actually just grab it right here. So I have cut my two pieces, and I have cut them incorrectly now that I think about it, because I cut these at 29 and 7/8, and they should actually be at 32 and 7/8 to account for inch and a half. But this is where, once again, math, right? So I will be recutting this here in a second, but the idea stays the same. Inch and a half plus inch and a half is going to be 3 inches. The width of the lumber is going to be 3.5 inches. So I can't just stack two, I can't, let me stop, I need to slow down. We want our header to be like this. This is going to be the widest side of the wood. So it's going to be 3.5 inches. I don't want to, we're not looking to just stack two of these on top of each other. We get a better structure when we turn it vertically. The reason why we're not just doing two studs slapped side by side and we have something in the middle is because instead of it being 3.5 inches, a stud plus a stud equals 3 inches, like I forgot to account for in a couple areas that we just talked about. I've taken a 1/2 inch piece of drywall. A lot of times you're actually going to want to do this probably with plywood, 1/2 inch piece of plywood, put it in between. We're going to nail this off to create what is called a box header. So I need to throw the video on pause real quick, make some adjustments. I'm going to nail this all together. I'm going to stand it up. We'll walk through some of the finer details, the final details of what we've got going on over here, and then we will wrap up the video. See you guys in a second. Alright guys, we've stood it up. Let's take a look at what we've got. I'm going to grab the camera and show you around. So, obviously it looks like a door opening because it is a door opening. The thing that I did mess up was usually after you frame a door, well, let's start with, I framed it 1.5 inches too tall because usually you're going to cut out that bottom plate in the doorway because it's finished concrete, so the flooring guys can put their stuff in there rather than you stepping over 1.5 inches worth of wood in your house. So this is going to work out for us though because we'll just set the door on top of it. It'll keep the wall a lot sturdier. But like we said, we've got 0, 2 feet, 4 feet. Then we've got our wall. We've got that box header up top that's going to create the extra support. I threw an extra little guy, I've got a little one in the background, extra little guy up there so that it's got some backer for when we put drywall in. And then I built this before we started recording, this little wing so that it will be sturdy as it stands up right now. So we have 2 nails going through into each stud, 2 nails in the bottom, 2 nails in the top, all that good stuff all the way around. So this header, we've got nailed down into what is into this stud, and then we've also got nails going into this guy right here, or I believe it's actually, doesn't matter. Anyways, the important part is that this needs to be nailed into this, as well as that stud right there, and we're good to go. So I'm gonna set you down real quick. Let's get a look at this door opening and talk about what's going on. So this is called a trimmer stud. A trimmer stud or jack stud is going to be supporting the head right here, the sandwich header. There we go. Sandwich header that we've got going on up here. Sometimes we'll have a beam, sometimes it'll just be a nice fat piece of wood. And you can have multiple trimmers. So if someone says, hey, we need to have this opening that is supported by 3 trimmers, that means 1, 2, 3 need to go up underneath whatever's going to be carrying the space for the space above. Now let's talk about what is called king studs. King studs are going to be on the outside of our headers, or on the outside of the beams or box headers. So these run all the way to our top plate. So if someone says, hey, I want 2 king studs and 2 jack studs or 2 trimmer studs, what they're saying is I want 1, 2 king studs and 1, 2 jack or trimmer studs. That's going to go the same thing for each side. This creates, like we said, an enormous amount of strength right here. I could probably do this with a single 2x4, but it is stupid strong. You can land quite a bit on top of that, especially in such a small space. So now, what do we have? We have the structure for us to be able to then, we'll demonstrate to you guys some electrical, different things like that going through the wall. We'll be able to put a door in here, show you door installation, all that good stuff. But before door installation, I forgot, we've got drywall that'll go on there. Drywall is allowed to have the spacing for every 2 feet, all that good stuff. So super excited to show you what we've got in store. I hope that this is helpful. It went a little longer than I thought. I threw a lot of words out there very quickly. So if you guys found something helpful out of this video, let me know in the comments. This is going to be a part of our construction basics or intro to construction series, so to try and make sure that if people have questions about what they can do at their house, they can absolutely do it. If you guys have any projects that require a lot more time and effort than you guys are looking to put into it, or you need a professional to really tighten up those fine finishes, let us know and we'll see what we can do to help you out. Hope you guys have a good one, and we'll see you on the next video.